Yeah, we're not ready to take, any offtake agreements now. We think this is the wrong time. We're a little bit early. We think the offtake prices are going to go up, and there's no reason. We've seen that some of the companies that have, signed offtake agreements are probably suffering a little bit now, because the costs are going up. But if you sign a contract that's got a fixed price contract, your price isn't going up.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Triangle Investor Interviews. I'm your host, Lucian Valkovic, and we are joined today by George Glasier, CEO of Western Uranium and Vanadium, who is currently at the Sunday Mine reporting live. How are you, George? How are things in Colorado?
They're good here in Colorado. It's springtime and the weather's warmed up. Here we're at the mine site, as you said. You can see the portal of the Sunday Mine behind us. You'll, during the interview, see some trucks hauling the ore out. So everything's good here in Colorado.
Excellent. Just a reminder for our viewers, the Sunday Mine Complex is located in the western San Miguel County, Colorado. The complex consists of the following five individual mines. The Sunday Mine, if I'm not mistaken, the Carnation Mine, St. Jude, West Sunday, and I'm missing the final one.
The Topaz.
The Topaz, yes,
Topaz, yeah.
exactly.
There are five separate portals. You're just seeing one portal. That's the Sunday portal behind us. And you're seeing five separate portals, at the complex. But right now
Excellent.
we're just hauling out of the Sunday portal. But we're hauling also, we'll have some more hauling out of the St. Jude later.
Today we have a lot of things to cover, the mix of my questions and the questions from my followers. So let's get on it. First, I would like to hear your take on the recent US Department of Interior plan to implement emergency permitting procedures to accelerate the development of domestic energy resources and critical minerals. Of course, uranium is included in this. How this benefits your company and how will you take the advantage of this fast track permitting process?
Well, we think this is a great move because we do have a couple of mines that were in the permitting stage. And that, under this new emergency order, will expedite that clearly. So, I mean, that is a real plus for us, plus anybody else in the United States that wants to start a mine, whether it's uranium or other critical minerals. So we see that as a real positive step by the administration to move forward with the production of critical minerals. And we're ready to submit, within the next 60 to 90 days, some additional permits for some of the mines that have been, in our plan to permit. And usually it would take well over a year, but if that's the case, it might speed it up considerably.
Yeah, some even say it will take not long than 28 days. That would be perfect. So this decision definitely changed some of your plans, George.
Well, yes, it certainly did, because if we can move into that permitting stage much faster, there's no reason to wait. Obviously, that's what we're planning to do. Now, again, the details of that have not come out. Of course, that's an overall order. How it works and goes down to the staff level, we're not sure. It's a good order, but again, there's got to be a little bit of detail lined out before we know exactly how that's going to work.
Yeah,
And
agreed.
because they're ordered to process it within 28 days, you still have to get your application ready. You have to get everything ready for them to do their review in the 28 days.
Yeah, agreed. The company has announced that it has entered into ore purchase agreement with Energy Fuels. Can you give me some specifics for this deal? How much of the cash flow do you expect from this deal, and some quantity numbers and sources of the ore you plan to send to White Mesa?
Well, the ore's already been mined. It's stockpiled in the Sunday and the St. Jude mine, and you see some of the trucks moving that ore to the ore pad where we'll load the over-the-road trucks and start delivering. We plan to start delivering a week of the 12th of May, have enough stockpile, have our trucks ready to go. So as we announced in our press release, it's a one-year arrangement with Energy Fuels for shipping up to 25,000 tons. Now, maybe the tonnage can be increased, but after meeting with the mill managers and the staff at the White Mesa Mill, they are pretty well stuck on the 1 year. They're trying to get all this ore in so they can process it within this period of time because they intend then to go into rare earth production. So they're going to do their uranium run and then move into rare earth production. So they want to get all that ore there within this 1 year period. We might be able to increase the quantity, but probably not the time, according to what they say.
Yeah, understood. But what happens after this 1 year passes from your side? Is there any chance of any clause that you can maybe have the additional period on?
Well, obviously, we're delivering into a certain arrangement with Energy Fuels. It's a confidential arrangement. We cannot, develop the price, but it's above the spot price. It's an attractive arrangement. And again, I don't know how much, they need in the way of purchased ore. There may be a chance if the uranium price reacts like we think it might, they could extend that mill run. We could deliver for a longer period of time. But again, I think it depends on what happens to the uranium market. And of course they can deliver their own ore, and they are delivering their ore. They're actually processing ore. When we were at the mill a couple of weeks ago, they were actually processing ore. So again, there could be a possibility. We're not ruling it out. But right now we're planning to deliver just through this 1 year period. And then if they continue to accept ore, we could certainly deliver more.
Sure, sure. George, where do you stand on building your own mill? Has anything changed in your long-term plans for the mill?
Well, no. I think the long-term plans, we still need a processing plant. Energy Fuels is a good processing plant. It's in excellent shape, but if it's going to go into rare earth production, it's not always going to be available for producing or milling uranium ore. So we need another mill that's dedicated strictly to uranium vanadium production, and that'll be our mill. And we're still in the process, of collecting the baseline data. We'll probably have our permit application in towards the end of this year or early in 26. We've met with the regulators that issue the permits. They're all on board to get this done in a timely manner. And again, it's the state of Colorado that issues the permit. So it's not under the federal order of 28 days. So it's going to take a bit longer, but we're still planning to build our mill, bring it on probably in 2.5, 3 years from now. Obviously, if the uranium price cooperates as we think it will.
Yeah. Have you applied for any government funding grants on that?
Absolutely, and we're looking at funding. There's been a big grant, or will be a big grant through the Department of Defense to step up the production of critical minerals in the United States, and we are currently looking at that as a potential way to finance that mill. There's plenty of money there available for critical minerals, including uranium, and so we haven't been committed to it yet, but that could certainly be a source of financing, and we're looking at that right now.
Okay, so that will be a part of the financing mix between your funds and the government funds for this. Actually, what is the approximate cost to permit, build, and start operating a uranium mill in the United States? I know it's a general question, it's a hypothetical question.
Yeah, the general, you can look at the information put out by Anfield for their mill. That's public information. You've interviewed them. That's in the ballpark of what we're thinking. So if you take a look at those numbers, you can permit and build a mill probably in the range of what they said, 70 to 80 million. Depends on the size of the mill. But again, that's their numbers. We've got our plans are being modified somewhat. We're going to license the mill for 1,000 tons, which is similar to what they're doing. We probably will not build 1,000 to start with. We'll build it in phases. Might build half of that to start with. But it depends again on other sources of ore. We can easily feed that much ore out of our Sunday mine, but we've got to get the other mines licensed and developed so that we can produce and feed that mill at a larger rate. But I look at the cost that Anfield put together. That's probably a reasonable estimate. So you can take a look at that to determine the cost of a mill of the size they're talking about.
Sure. George, in October 2024, you successfully acquired the Mustang mineral processing site. The acquisition included all historical data and the equipment utilized for the site's previous successful licensing application. I would like to touch on that. What data and equipment were acquired back then?
Well, obviously the data that was acquired was all the baseline data that was collected for the application for that mill, and all that data is available to us, plus all of the engineering data. The complete engineering for that plan for the mill was available to us. That was incredible. The data that it would cost you, millions of dollars to duplicate today, we were able to acquire in that acquisition. So, and the equipment that we acquired was the monitoring equipment, the MET towers. There's 9 monitoring wells on the site. All of that which you have to license a mill is already there. So it was a real advantage to acquire it. And that put us way ahead in licensing this project because it's already there. And what we'll submit is an application based on the same data and the same engineering plans that were submitted and approved years ago.
Yeah. Did you have any new offtake, any discussions, offtake discussions recently? And is your offtake strategy still with waiting for higher prices still in place for you? How are you looking with your offtake strategy?
Yeah, we're not ready to take, any offtake agreements now. We think this is the wrong time. We're a little bit early. We think the offtake prices are going to go up. And there's no reason. We've seen that some of the companies that have, signed offtake agreements are probably suffering a little bit now, because the costs are going up. But if you sign a contract that's got a fixed price contract, your price isn't going up. Now, if you sign one strictly at market, we're not prepared to do that. We need some kind of floors and certainly ceilings. And we've had discussions, but we're not prepared right now to sign any offtake contracts. We don't need them. I think it gets closer to the actual financing in the mill. Depends on how we do it. Then you might need offtakes. But right now, we don't need the financing. We've got plenty of cash to license the mill and go forward with the project until we need construction financing.
George, how is Sunday Mine complex works going? Is everything as you expected? Any hurdles?
No, I think it's going quite well. We are now that we basically decided to haul the ore out. We were developing and producing ore as we were developing, and we're continuing to do that. But now that we're in the stage of hauling ore out, we've got the miners basically running the trucks, as you see, loading the trucks. So we're not doing active mining. We'll shut that down. Once we get a stockpile of ore outside the mine, then they'll go back into the mining stage. So it's going quite well. Yeah, we're pleased with what's going on at the Sunday Mine.
Excellent. Have you made any decisions for the Sage Mine in the meantime?
Yeah, we have. We've taken a look at that. We're going to go over there and at least take a look at it, see what kind of refurbishment it needs. That's on our plans, obviously. Our miners are busy here. We need to free up a couple of them to go over there. And that's still in our plans to do that in the next 6 to 9 months. But again, limited, resources people-wise. We're working at the Sunday Mine. And with the ore haulage, it's important for us to get all that ore out so we can start trucking. Once we free up a couple of miners, we can send them over there to start a little rehab of that and assessing what we should do at that particular mine site.
Okay, any news on the exploration work for San Rafael in Utah?
Yes, we've got our permits. We were looking to drill the monitor wells over there as part of the permitting process. It's a little bit hard to find a driller that goes over there and is ready to drill. We drilled one monitor well at the Sunday Mine just recently, finished that. That driller may be available to us in the next 3 or 4 months, but it was only a one drill program here, which he was able to free up the time to do it. But for the 5 wells we need over there, it's going to take him a bit longer. But that's the next step at the San Rafael. Drill the monitor wells. We've been looking at engineering plans for the shaft design. So we're advancing that. We just haven't done anything more on the drilling of the monitor wells, which is the next step.
Yeah. Any news on other your non-core projects? Any developments in the meantime since our last talk?
Well, we've completely refurbished or reclaimed the Van 4 mine, and that's one of them that we're going to re-permit. That one's got a significant resource in it, and we can reopen that mine fairly easily once a new permit is issued. So under this expedited permitting scenario, we hope to get that one permitted and reestablish that as a production mine. Of course, at the Hanson Taylor, we just recently initiated discussions about how we can get that one into production. There are several studies that have been done on that as to the method of production, whether it's in situ, whether it's borehole mining. But that's a project that we also are working on actively now to decide how to mine that and basically how to permit that one.
So Hanson has an ISR, possible ISR future.
Yes, yeah, it
It has a
definitely.
potential, right?
Sure. Yeah, it's got a real potential. We've talked to some of the experts in ISR mining, and they agree that technically could be mined by ISR.
Okay, okay. How is the financial plan for this year looking? If I remember correctly, you raised approximately 5.5 million in November last year, and now with this revenue coming from the ore purchase, do you plan to raise money this year anytime soon? What's the plan?
It depends. If we keep going with all these permitting plans and the mining, we do get cash flows out of the ore purchase arrangement, but yeah, we probably will need to raise some additional capital, because we're doing a lot of things, and the ore coming out of there will be a real plus. But again, it depends on the activities we decide to undertake in the next year. But could be that we will possibly raise some additional capital.
Okay, okay. You have some additional revenue from your oil and gas royalty, right?
Yes, yeah, we get a monthly check for our oil and gas royalties, which is kind of nice. They've gone up and down based on the production levels of those wells and, again, the price of oil and gas. But it's a nice little royalty check that comes in every month.
Definitely. George, long-term strategy. If somebody asks you, how do you see Western Uranium and Vanadium in 3 years from now? I mean, what projects will produce? How do you see it going forward? What would you say to them?
Well, in 3 years from now, of course, the Sunday Mine will be in full production. The San Rafael should be in production. The Van 4, the Sage, all of our existing properties, plus additional acquisitions we're looking at. We think there's some good properties out there, some good companies that we might be able to acquire. 3 years is out of ways, and there's a little uncertainty, but we're looking at all those possibilities. And with additional capital that we might acquire, I think we can expand our production capability considerably, because the production at the mill can certainly warrant additional mining properties. And again, we're going to open up the mill for other companies to come. We've had discussions already with 3 or 4 other companies that hold properties in the area about them coming to the mill. So that's a real possibility, and we expect in the next year to probably sign some letters of intent with some of these companies to basically offer them capacity in the mill, whether we buy their ore or whether we toll mill for them. It's a way for them to guarantee they've got capacity over a longer term for their mine development. And we see that as a key thing in the next 3 years, of bringing the whole industry in for all these companies that have a number of properties in the area. And there are a number of them that are exploring but are ready to develop if they have a potential cash flow from a milling operation.
Yeah, yeah. George, how are you looking with this uranium market, current uranium market, and the performance of the equities? Are you seeing the signs of recovery?
Well, we're not seeing it yet in the equities. I think the major markets, go up and down. I see just this morning, the markets are down. It's hard to buck that trend. The uranium has been down for a number of months. We think that's going to change. Obviously, President Trump ordered the Commerce Department to do a 232 investigation for all critical minerals, including uranium, to determine tariffs or other, protections that are needed to increase the production of these things in the United States. And I don't know if you recall, but there was a 232 examination done several years ago under the Trump administration specifically for uranium, and it came out of that, the recommendation was not a tariff, but a quota, that 25% of the U.S. demand has to be filled by U.S. uranium. We think the Commerce Department could very well recommend that to the president as a solution. Whether there's tariffs in addition to that, we don't know, but that could be really a trigger that advances U.S. production quickly and increases obviously the price, the spot price, so that U.S. producers can benefit. And we think that's going to have a real impact. And that study's due out in the next, we understood it was 180 days, but possibly some recommendations within 90 days of the issue of that order.
Yeah, yeah. George, final question. News flow from the company. What can investors expect in the upcoming period?
Well, you'll be getting news on our order deliveries. We'll give you tonnages. We'll give you things like that we're able to deliver as soon as we start delivering. There'll be that. There's going to be some news on our permitting coming out, those kind of things. So news releases on our activities right now, you can expect that over the next few months.
Okay, so stay tuned. That was George Glasier live from Sunday Mine Complex. George, thank you for this report, and I look forward to host you again, maybe from another mine.
Absolutely. Good. We look forward to it.